Dragon's Dogma II is by far the most critically acclaimed and controversial release of March, debuting to a Metacritic average of 89 but a Steam review percentage of just 39% positive on its day of release, with critics praising its excellent combat and open world, but players criticizing its often awful optimization.
But the complaints don't stop there, as the developer saw fit to introduce microtransactions after the reviews had already been published. This means paying a few extra dollars on top of the already AAA price tag, for benefits such as editing your character and using fast travel. While most of these can be achieved through in-game means, paying your way obviously speeds up the process, and due to the nature of how these purchases were introduced, it certainly left an understandably sour taste in players' mouths.
However, after playing the game myself, I have nothing but praise. I could mention the beautiful open world, instantly engaging narrative, or the impressively in-depth character customizer, but I'd like to highlight what I'd describe as the most hands-on combat system I've ever experienced, and I mean that quite literally. Scaling enormous beasts and sending them crashing to the ground is something I've never seen before in an open world RPG of this scale. I just couldn't get enough of sneakily crawling up a dragon's tail only to impale its skull and send it back to where it came from. And that's not to mention the equally impressive pawn system that lets you travel around the world with 3 talkative and combat-ready companions. They'll even give you directions to a chest they found in another player's world, or in my case, will catch you after falling 3 stories. It's endlessly exciting, and that's why it's such a shame that a lot of this has been hidden behind the admittedly justified criticism surrounding performance and microtransactions, because beneath that, there really is something special here, and I'd highly encourage you to keep an eye out for whenever it's ready.
Rise of the Ronin was one of the most anticipated titles of not only March, but the entirety of 2024, and considering it's from the developers of the incredibly popular Neo games, and most recently the critically acclaimed Wolong Fallen Dynasty, I would have said that this anticipation was fairly justified. But it seems Team Ninja's first attempt at a seamless open world hasn't quite hit the mark, receiving an acceptable Metacritic average of 76, but drawing a lot of criticism surrounding its open world bloat and outdated visuals. But almost all of the reviews agree that the signature Team Ninja combat is still there.
The remake of 1992's Alone in the Dark seems to be yet another fairly mediocre release for the month of March, receiving a Metacritic average of 64 thanks to its lack of polish and bland design. But it did draw some praise for the performances from lead actors David Harbour and Jodie Comer, as well as for its faithful rendition of the modern survival horror genre. But outside of that, it does seem to be yet another miss for the endlessly troubled franchise.
In a month of some fairly disappointing releases, I'm honestly impressed that a re-release has managed to take the cake for the most disastrous launch of the month. And that title is the Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection, which is currently sitting at just 20% positive reviews on Steam, with players rightfully complaining about the 70GB storage requirement and frankly abysmal servers.
South Park Snow Day is the most recent entry in the TV and video game franchise that brought us critically acclaimed RPGs such as 2014's The Stick of Truth. But unlike those titles, this one is a 3D multiplayer game. It's met a shaky reception from both critics and fans, with it sitting at a Metacritic average of 60 and a Steam review percentage of 59% positive. However, I actually really enjoyed it, and you can find out why in the full review that's on screen now.
Princess Peach Showtime is the latest Nintendo character spin-off game, following in the footsteps of last month's Mario vs Donkey Kong, with this month's title hitting a fairly similar reception, receiving a generally favourable Metacritic score of 75, due to its inconsistent but enjoyable action.
Bears in Space is a first-person shooter that has you playing as exactly that, a bear in space. Comparing itself to games such as High on Life and Doom Eternal, I really wasn't sure what to expect when I tried out its demo on Steam, but after finishing it in about half an hour, I began to understand why it made those comparisons. This is a bullet hell fast-paced boomer shooter that doesn't hold back on the silliness, and it's all the better because of it, never taking itself too seriously while also delivering a satisfying gameplay loop and a wacky storyline that never gets boring. Developed by just 3 people in the space of 7 years, Bears in Space is a remarkable achievement, and I'd highly encourage you to give it a try.
Unfortunately for fans of last year's Game of the Year Baldur's Gate 3, the developer Larian has announced that they will not be producing any DLC for the turn-based RPG, and also have no plans to develop a sequel. Now, this doesn't mean there won't be a Baldur's Gate 4, after all Larian does not own the license, it just means that if there is a follow-up, it won't be made by them. So to whichever studio that daunting task befalls, I wish you good luck.
March was a pretty big month for Marvel game announcements, with a story trailer for Marvel 1943 Rise of Hydra, and the announcement trailer for the upcoming hero shooter Marvel Rivals.
So what do we have to look forward to next month? Honestly, it's not looking like much. Outside of a handful of formerly exclusive Xbox titles making their way to other platforms, we can expect to see the release of PlayStation exclusive action-adventure hack-and-slash Stellar Blade, as well as the medieval strategy game Manor Lords, and an interesting looking handmade narrative adventure Harold Halibut. So if you'd like to keep up to date on all of those titles next month, please make sure to consider subscribing as well as leaving a like and a comment.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see see you next month.